Okay, let's dive into this. A really pivotal moment in African history, one that still, sparks so much debate. The assassination of Patrice Lumumba. He was the very first prime minister of the Republic of Congo.
Yeah, it's a story with so many layers, isn't it? And the fallout, well, it's still felt today.
Absolutely. And what's striking right away is how Lumumba just instantly became this symbol for African independence.
hmm His vision was powerful, really uncompromising. He wanted a Congo that was unified, yes, but also genuinely free from any kind of colonial hangover.
Totally. And that's exactly what we want to unpack for you today. We'll be looking at our sources, trying to pin down the key factors, the main players involved in his assassination.
Right. The goal is really to get a clearer picture of this incredibly complex event and understand why it still matters on a global scale.
Stepping back, Lumumba's story, it's like a lens, isn't it? It helps us understand that really turbulent time, the start of post-colonial
And the
Africa.
long shadow, cast by outside interest, it really highlights that.
So, who was this man? The one who inspired such hope, but also, well, such intense opposition.
Well, Lumumba, he was born back in 1925 in what was then the Belgian Congo. And what hits you straight away is his nationalism. Just this deep, passionate belief in self-determination for the Congolese people.
Especially considering the context, right? European powers still held sway over so much of Africa then.
Exactly. His ideas were genuinely groundbreaking for the time.
And he didn't just think it, he acted on it. He organized people.
That's right. He was a key figure in founding the Congolese National Movement, the MNC, their main aim. Independence from Belgium. Simple as that. Well, not simple to achieve, but a clear goal. A democratic republic.
They were really pushing for fundamental change.
Mhm.
Then 1960 arrives. It's this huge year. Congo gets independence. Lumumba's the first prime minister. Sounds like victory, but
But yeah, there's always a but, isn't there? It was a massive achievement, no doubt.
yeah.
But the new nation was fragile, really fragile.
Yes.
Well, decades of Belgian rule had left deep scars. Divisions, politically, socially, ethnically. It wasn't a unified whole, not really. And that fragility, that just set the stage for all the problems to come.
And those problems surfaced almost immediately, didn't they? These internal fractures, regional tensions, threatening to pull the country apart.
Right away. The secession of Katanga province was a huge early crisis. And you have to understand, Katanga was where the mineral wealth was concentrated.
Ah, the resources.
Exactly. And the secessionist leader, Moise Tshom, he had serious backing from Belgian mining companies who, well, they wanted to protect their investments.
So you've got a brand new country, its leader trying to hold it together, and boom, a vital, wealthy region breaks off with help from the old colonial power. That sounds impossible.
It was an incredibly tough spot. Lumumba was determined, though. He asked the United Nations for military help to stop the secession.
And the UN response?
It was slow, hesitant, partly because, Belgium still pulled a lot of strings internationally and in the region. It made resolving it really difficult.
So you can just picture Lumumba getting more and more isolated in those first months, trying to assert sovereignty, but hitting walls both inside Congo and outside.
Precisely. And that isolation wasn't just domestic. Western powers started looking at him sideways, getting suspicious.
Which brings us to the big question. Why? Why was he seen as such a threat?
Well, a lot of it came down to his ideology, his bigger vision. It wasn't just about Congo.
Pan-Africanism.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
His firm belief in a united, independent Africa, free from Western imperialism that really rattled the established powers, they saw him as kind of a radical challenging their influence.
He wanted African nations working together without external meddling.
hmm And then later on top of that, you've got the Cold War heating up.
Right, so his openness to talking with the Soviet Union must have set off alarm bells everywhere.
Huge alarm bells. In Washington, in Brussels, they immediately jumped to conclusions, saw it as proof of communist sympathies.
Which in their eyes threatened their strategic interests.
Strategic and, maybe even more importantly, economic interests. Let's not forget Congo's resources.
Arc uranium.
Vital stuff. Copper for industry, uranium for, well, nuclear weapons. Access to those was absolutely critical for the West.
So Lumumba, perceived as anti-Western, possibly cozying up to the Soviets, that wasn't just a political disagreement for them. It was a direct threat to the bottom line, to security.
You got it. His diplomatic feelers towards Moscow, which honestly were probably born out of frustration with the West's stance on Katanga, just cemented their view. He became, in their eyes, a dangerous element that had to be controlled or removed.
Okay, this really lays bare why Belgium and the US got so deeply involved. They had very real, tangible stakes in getting rid of Lumumba.
Their roles are absolutely crucial to understand. Both countries stood to lose a lot, especially economically, if Lumumba stayed in power and followed through on his plans. The mining sector particularly.
Let's break it down. Belgium first. The former colonizer. Decades of control, right?
Over 60 years. They had massive investments and, frankly, expected to keep pulling the strings even after independence. Lumumba's talk of nationalization, his whole anti-imperialist stance, that was a direct challenge to their access to Congo's mineral wealth.
And their connection to Cham and Katanga was pretty tight.
Very tight. Belgium had a long relationship with Cham and actively helped his secession effort. It was a calculated move to keep control over Katanga's mines, no matter what happened in the capital.
There's that story, too, about King Baudouin meeting Lumumba in 1960. Apparently, the king was quite insulting.
Yeah, reports suggest Baudouin was dismissive, condescending, basically questioning Lumumba's ability to lead. That kind of thing. It obviously didn't help. It just fueled Lumumba's defiance and made a bad relationship worse.
Okay, now the U.S., the Cold War context is key here, the fear of Soviet influence spreading.
Absolutely. For the U.S., the primary driver was stopping Congo from falling into the Soviet orbit. And we know now from declassified documents that the CIA wasn't just watching. They were actively involved in covert operations to remove Lumumba.
Including some really out-there plots, like poison.
Yes, unbelievably.
Mm.
There were documented plans, like developing lethal toxins disguised as toothpaste or soap to assassinate him. That specific plot failed, but it shows the lengths they were considering.
And the directive, it might have come from the very top, President Eisenhower.
There's strong evidence suggesting that, yes. Reports indicate Eisenhower personally authorized actions to remove Lumumba. Later declassifications made the CIA's deep involvement in the conspiracy pretty undeniable.
Wow. So with these major powers actively working against him behind the scenes, his position just became weaker and weaker, which leads us to the coup.
September 14th, 1960. That was the day. Colonel Joseph Mobutu, the army chief, staged a coup, effectively pushed Lumumba out of the prime minister's office.
And Mobutu had friends in high places.
He did. He had the backing of both the U.S. and Belgian governments. They saw him as, well, more manageable.
Someone who wouldn't rock the boat, basically.
Yeah.
Especially regarding those socialist-leaning policies they feared from Lumumba.
Exactly. Mobutu seemed like a safer pair of hands, someone who'd likely protect Western economic and geopolitical interests. That's why they supported his coup.
So Lumumba's under house arrest after the coup, but the danger wasn't over.
Not at all. The plotting just intensified. CIA, Belgian officials, Mobutu's people, they were all still working on how to permanently deal with Lumumba while he was confined.
And somehow, despite international eyes being on the situation, he ends up being handed over to his enemies in Katanga.
It's tragic. There were attempts, negotiations, to try and get him safe passage, maybe under UN protection, but they all fell through. In the end, he was transferred into the custody of the Katangan authorities, essentially delivered to his executioners.
Which takes us to that awful day, January 17th, 1961.
Yeah. Lumumba, along with two colleagues, Maurice Mpolo and Joseph Okito, they were held in Katanga under just brutal conditions, then taken out to a remote spot.
And executed.
By firing squad. And the whole thing was kept secret at first.
The details that emerged later about what happened to the bodies, just gruesome.
Truly horrific. Reports of dismemberment, disposal in acid, extreme measures clearly taken to erase all evidence to hide the crime.
And it seems clear this wasn't just Mobutu acting alone, or even just the Katangans. Belgian officers were involved on the ground.
Absolutely. The execution was carried out with the cooperation of Belgian officers alongside the Katangan forces.
And the shadow of U.S. and Belgian complicity hangs heavy over it all, even if the exact level of direct command is debated.
Whether it was direct orders or indirect support, facilitation, coordination, it's undeniable that they were complicit in the events leading to and including the assassination.
So Lumumba is killed, but did that bring stability to Congo?
Not even close. In fact, you could argue it did the opposite. Mobutu took full control eventually, supported by the West, yes, but his decades-long rule became synonymous with, well, corruption, dictatorship, economic disaster.
It created a power vacuum, didn't it? And allowed for more external meddling.
Precisely. Removing a leader with Lumumba's vision, however controversial, left the country vulnerable. It arguably contributed to decades of conflict and instability, not just in Congo, but the wider region.
But there have been efforts since then to get to the truth, right? Investigations.
Yes, thankfully, both within Congo and internationally. People pushed for answers about who was responsible. A major one was the Belgian parliamentary inquiry in 2002.
And they acknowledged Belgium's role.
They did. They acknowledged Belgium had a moral responsibility in the events leading to his death. It was significant.
And the Belgian government actually apologized before that in 2001.
Yes, an official apology was issued. Though, for many Congolese and observers, it felt maybe a bit insufficient, given the scale of Belgium's involvement over decades.
But despite everything, Lumumba's image, his legacy, it endures, doesn't it? Especially as a symbol against colonialism.
Hugely. Across Africa and beyond, he's still seen as this icon of resistance, a hero who stood up to imperialism. His assassination also became a kind of grim warning, to other African leaders who might challenge Western dominance.
And his dream of a united, independent Congo that still inspires people.
Absolutely. That vision of sovereignty, of unity,
Yeah.
it resonates through generations. His name constantly comes up in discussions about freedom, self-determination, the ongoing struggle against oppression.
Within Congo itself, is his memory actively kept alive?
Oh, definitely. His death is a major point of national reflection. There are efforts to honor him, to make sure the story is told, and to sort of grapple with what his loss meant for the country's path.
When you boil it down, his assassination really just starkly showed how far external powers would go to protect their interests, particularly resources in Africa.
It really did. And it highlighted the extreme vulnerability of these newly independent nations when faced with that kind of determined interference.
So wrapping up, it wasn't one single thing, was it? Lumumba's death came from this toxic mix. Internal politics, yes, but heavily driven by the economic agendas of Belgium and the U.S., all playing out against the backdrop of the Cold War.
Exactly, a complex web. Internal rivalries, secessionist movements, but the external pressures, the interests of those powerful nations, they were undeniably decisive. A tragic outcome for Lumumba and for Congo.
It was more than just one man's death. It was a turning point for Congo, a really dark chapter in that bigger story of Africa finding its own way after colonialism, a story that's still being written.
His assassination is a powerful, maybe painful reminder of the immense challenges these new nations faced, trying to assert real sovereignty against powerful global forces.
Which leaves us, and you, with something to think about. What are the real long-term consequences when powerful outside interests interfere so drastically in the affairs of emerging nations? And maybe more importantly, what does genuine sovereignty even look like in our